Good morning. Welcome to First Unitarian Universalist Church. We are a church of the free faith, believing that wisdom and truth come from many sources and practices, ancient and modern, sacred and secular. And in community, we grow our spirits and lives of justice and compassion. Your faith, your doubts, and your identity are welcome here. A special welcome to visitors. We're glad you're here. Children are welcome in the sanctuary at any time, and there's also nursery care and regular classes for children following the Time for All Ages story. Please join us after service for coffee and donuts down in the Commons. And here are a few highlights of special events coming up this busy week. Buckle in, here we go. Today at 12:30, Melissa Egler will be hosting a Chalice Circle Sampler. It'll take place in the chapel, and it offers an introduction to a Chalice Circle, a sampling of the art of deep listening and sharing. New members and visitors are invited to join to get a feel for the small group ministry. This afternoon at 3, join with other churches to provide a loving and inclusive presence during the Franklin Graham event. We'll gather just outside Zumbro Lutheran to share messages of love and inclusion, especially for LGBTQ folks. Then tonight at 7, join us for a special building consultant forum. Rachel Maxwell, who we worked with last year, is by chance coming through Rochester. So tonight, she'll stop by here at 7 and give some brief highlights of her report and have time for questions and conversation. All are welcome to join us in the Commons. Wednesday evening, join us for supper and a forum. This week will be an important update about the asylum support our church has been offering to a local family seeking asylum and recent developments requiring more support. Join Phil Wheeler and others to hear about the work we've been doing and the immediate needs going forward. Supper will be served from 6 to 7, and the forum will be at 7 o'clock. Next week, after the services, join us for a special blessing of the animals in the courtyard. We'll gather at 3, all creatures, great and small, pets, pictures of pets that have recently passed are welcome. And we'll share cider and treats for all of the creatures. Again, that's 3 o'clock next Sunday. And now I'd like to welcome Gail Bishop up for a special announcement about the fall auction.
We are excited to announce the return of the fall auction, and we are accepting donations online now until October 26th, so be thinking about what fun social experience or exciting item that you can donate. It'll be a hybrid format of the auction this year, so the silent auction, the raffle, and the fixed price will be online only, but then our fun and festive live auction will be held the evening of November 5th here at church in the sanctuary. But we'll kick off that night with the chili and cornbread cook-off, so be sure to sign up to bring your best chili, whether that's meat or vegetarian or cornbread, and the sign-up for that is in the foyer downstairs. That evening also we'll have childcare, we'll have some other activities, so watch for some more details in your e-news, and it'll be a fun evening for you and your family, so you won't want to miss it. And to sign up for any of those things, just check the e-news link, go to the auction, or on the QR code on the foyer table downstairs. Thanks.
And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Amy Nelson. I'm the Director of Faith Development here. I would like to invite everybody to come and explore the newly kind of reopened education wing today between services. You will get to see the middle school and high school classes in action. You will get to find out what it means to be a play specialist. And you'll get to enjoy some treats and enter a drawing for a cute little plant that is adorable. You have to come up and see it. So between services, join us up the ramp and to the right, and we will show you around the RE wing, and you get to see all the fun stuff that's happened.
Thanks, Gail and Amy. And finally, we are glad to welcome our guest preacher, Reverend Jim Fody. Jim recently served First Unitarian Society in Minneapolis and provides leadership and service to Unitarian Universalism throughout our entire region. Jim, thanks for being here. And now let us enter worship this morning with the words from Reverend Eliza Tupper Wilkes, a minister of this church in the 1870s. May our faith in humanity and our message of hope and good cheer light our way. As we rise in body or spirit for our opening hymn, please give a wave to those online and offer a quick hello to those around you, and the music will call us back.
Good morning, everyone. It is great to be here. I don't know how you normally do things, so it seems fine. It all seems fine to me. Good to be back. We're going to light our chalice with a little poem from the Reverend Dr. David Breeden, whom I worked with for 8 years. Oh, I can do this. Let's do this. Whom I worked with for 8 years up in Minneapolis. We gather together here now, summoning our courage to be. We gather bringing our weariness and our energy. We gather bringing our wariness and our visions. Like trees in rocky places, our roots clutch. What we find is each other. What we find is each other holding tightly. Courage is not certitude. Courage is not assurance. Courage is the willingness to join the attempt, to join in the unlikely, even the impossible. Courage is a choice. It's a way of knowing and a way of joining together. Courage is knowing that together we will do what none of us can do alone.
As we start the month of October, we start, of course, with a new theme, and this month's theme is courage. Sometimes we think that courage is something that big, strong, loud people have. Well, I'm going to tell you a story today that tells you no matter what your size or your energy level or your volume, everybody has courage deep inside. The Lion Inside by Rachel Bright and Jim Field. In a dry, dusty place where the sand sparkles gold stood a mighty fly rock, all craggy and old. And under that rock, a tiny full house, lived the littlest, quietest, meekest brown mouse. He was so very tiny and so incredibly small that nobody noticed him ever, not at all. He got stepped on and sat on and missed out on stuff, ignored and forgotten. His little mouse life was tough. Meanwhile, far above, on top of the rock, times were quite different. It was Lion O'Clock. This huge, toothy creature made sure everyone saw and how important he was by how loud he could roar. He was head of the pack and extremely proud. He loved showing strength to wow the crowd. If only, thought Mouse, I could be half that loud. Late one dark night, while snug in his bed, the cleverest thought popped into his head. I know what I need, my own special roar. So instead of a squeak, I could let my voice soar. Yes, thought the mouse, I must find out how. I must talk to Lion. I must talk to him now. It wouldn't be easy approaching the beast. The little mouse knew he might become a feast. It was time to be strong and take a chance after all. Forever was such a long time to feel small. He made himself brave and set off to the top. It was the scariest thing he could do, but he just couldn't stop. The farther he climbed, the closer he grew to the slumbering lion. Now what to do? But he remembers, if you want things to change, you first have to change you. Mr. Lion, pardon me, sir. Squeak, Mr. Lion, I have come here for. Is there any way you could teach me to roar? A silence befell the twinkling plain. Lion opened his eyes and puffed out his mane. Time went so slow, it felt like a week. Then he opened his mouth and let out an eek. Don't hurt me, he whimpered. Oh, try to be nice. Well, this mighty lion was frightened of mice. Don't worry, peeped Mouse. I'm here as a friend. And this simple moment was the start, not the end. Mouse had found his true voice and learned to speak out, and for that you don't need to roar or even to shout. From that day on, the two were a pair. The rock was much better when they both could share. The mouse, while still little, felt big in his head, and the lion still roared, but with laughter instead. Yes, that day they both learned that no matter your size, we all have a mouse and a lion inside. I would like to invite the children. We'll meet over by the door as Austin plays the children's benediction.
Good morning. It is good to be with you. I first want to extend so much gratitude to those involved yesterday with our handcrafted bazaar. Over 47 local artists from the community coming to support them and this church. It's a huge undertaking. The next day, I'm not so sure if I want to do it again, but it's a beautiful show of community and support. So thank you for all who participated. I invite you to settle in here as we create a place of communal caring and connection. Here we honor all who support us in this caring, loving, and all-inclusive ministry. We send gratitude to Phyllis Beery, serving as our caring coordinator for the last 2 weeks, arranging care for our members and friends in need. Sue Nielsen will take over tomorrow for the next week, and we thank her for that. The wonderful members of our caring committee are incredible examples of our compassionate community, holding us up as we go through challenging and happy times. And these past years have taken a lot out of us. They have taken a lot from us. If during this time of increasing needs in our lives, you are experiencing challenges, we encourage you to reach out for support and help. Many of us may need additional care, whether it be personal pastoral care or other assistance, and we encourage you to reach out to Reverend Luke or myself with that request. And now it's time to pause amidst the busyness of our lives, to slow down enough to consider the beauty that is here all around us, and to open a space for listening and love. Breathe deep the breath of life. Feel below you the earth and its ancient turning, and above you the sky and the stars shining with ancient light, holding you in this space, yourself made of earth and stars. Sit deeply here in this community of love and justice, hope and grace. Know that you are named and you are known as beloved. I invite you into this time of meditation, this time of prayer, first by sharing a silence together. Spirit of life, source of love, God of many names and beyond all naming, we hold in our hearts all those who suffer in mind, body, or spirit. I invite you to bring the names you are holding in your heart this day, in joy or sorrow, in celebration or concern, and silently or aloud now in this time to speak their names. For all those names, spoken and unspoken, may we be held in love and grace. These words of meditation come from Richard Wagamies. You can't test your courage timidly. You have to run through the fire, arms waving, legs pumping, and heart beating wildly with the effort of reclaiming something vital, lost, laid aside, or just plain forgotten. When you do that, you discover that we shine most brightly in community, the whole bedraggled, worn, frayed, and tattered lot of us, bound together forever by a shared courage, a family forged in the heat of earnest struggle. May the faith in the Spirit of life, love for the community of earth, and love for the light in each other be ours now and in all the days to come.
Today's reading is The Low Road by Marge Percy. What can they do to you? Whatever they want. They can set you up, they can bust you, they can break your fingers, they can burn your brain with electricity, blur you with drugs till you can't walk, can't remember. They can take your child, wall up your lover. They can do anything you can't stop them from doing. How can you stop them? Alone, you can fight, you can refuse, you can take what revenge you can, but they roll over you. But two people fighting back to back can cut through a mob. A snake dancing file can break a cordon. An army can meet an army. Two people can keep each other sane, can give support, conviction, love, massage, hope, sex. Three people are a delegation, a committee, a wedge. With four, you can play bridge and start an organization. With six, you can rent a whole house and eat pie for dinner with no seconds and hold a fundraising party. A dozen make a demonstration. 100 fill a hall. 1,000 have solidarity and your own newsletter. 10,000 power in your own paper. 100,000 your own media. 10 million your own country. It goes on one at a time. It starts when you care to act. It starts when you do it again and they say no. It starts when you say we and you know who you mean, and each day you mean one more. Next, I'd like to have Phil come up to share information about this month's monthly justice partner.
Thank you. I'm Phil Wheeler. I'm a member of this church. Back in October of 2017, after months of education and discussion, this congregation overwhelmingly adopted a congregational resolution on sanctuary and immigrant justice. The resolution established this church as a sanctuary church and commits us to assist in providing sanctuary, support, and refuge to other law-abiding immigrants, regardless of their immigration status. In keeping with this resolution, we have joined with other faith communities to establish Southeastern Minnesota Interfaith Immigrant Legal Defense, or SMILD. SMILD has provided free legal services to immigrants from our area who are in detention, promotes local initiatives such as the recently adopted Municipal ID program, and advocates for changes in immigration law. In addition, our church has created an Immigrant Justice Fund, which supports our efforts to assist a family of Afghan refugees and, more recently, a family of Nicaraguan asylum seekers. The federal government has identified funds and programs to coordinate support for Afghans. Because support is not complete, we have provided transportation, school supplies, educational support, and more recently, diapers, for example. The Gyasis are expecting. There are no federal programs in place to support asylum seekers. They are not eligible to work for work authorization until 6 months after applying for asylum. Working without authorization conflicts with immigration law and jeopardizes the chances for asylum, and this means that all costs associated with food, clothing, housing, utilities, school supplies, and so on are borne by the sponsor. There are some in our society who see asylum as a loophole in immigration law. This is not the case for the family we are helping. One of the family has been jailed and tortured. For 3 of the family, paramilitary gangs have threatened to burn their house down with them in it. For this family, asylum is not a loophole, it's a lifeline. So, for this month, contributions to the plate will go to the First Unitarian Universalist Immigrant Justice Fund so we can help keep helping refugees, keep sponsoring asylum seekers, and keep supporting immigrant justice. Please give generously to the extent you are able. Tasha Kaur, gracias, thank you.
My mother has a gift for working with unruly crowds. Throughout her career, she's spent a lot of time with people who are talking over each other, who are not listening, who are doing what they feel like doing instead of what's good for everyone. She has experience in mediating conflict, calming individuals down, bringing things to order, and clarifying what is right and what is wrong. I have been in the room when she has put these magical powers to use. It's really something to witness. And all these skills she has make her a great person to be getting more involved in the public square. You see, my mom is a preschool teacher. And so interruptions and outbursts and childish behavior of the kind that we have been seeing increasingly in public life in our country, these things are nothing new to her. Still, it's one thing to hold 4-year-olds to account, and quite another to do so for grown-ups, especially when those grown-ups might be your neighbors. My mom has had the opportunity to draw on her skills and to summon up her courage because the school board in my hometown has recently been taken over by extremists. These extremists are connected to the book-banning, anti-mask, anti-trans, parents' rights crowd. Public discourse in my hometown is shifting away from actual educational issues and shifting away from values that Unitarian Universalists hold dear. The valuing of every person, the valuing of human diversity, the valuing of reason, the valuing of the democratic process. Such values are so important that they are enshrined in our principles. In my hometown, the erosion of democracy started before the school board election. As is becoming more common, the candidates refused to appear at public forums to answer questions from voters. Instead, they held a one-sided meet and greet at a bowling alley known for hosting conceal and carry classes. When the election came around, many parents in town hadn't been paying attention, and the extremists took over. And one of the first things they wanted to do was change the way the school board was elected. They wanted to get rid of at-large seats and move to a rarely used winner-take-all system that would make it harder to vote them out. This was their top priority. A political scientist quoted in the newspaper said that such voting systems are more often associated with authoritarian regimes than with democracies. And you know, this kind of shenanigans is happening all around the country. It might be happening in your hometown, too. My hometown school board took up this electoral scheme on short notice at a special meeting held on a different night from their usual meetings. Gee, I wonder why. But my mom and her allies were paying attention. They went to the meeting. And it was there that my mom, the retired preschool teacher, who rarely spoke in front of rooms full of adults, drew on her courage and delivered her excellent rebuke to that board. Speaking before residents and before the entire internet, she really wanted to give the board members a timeout and send a note home to their parents. But she stuck to her script, and as her biggest fan, my dad, put it, she nailed it. The board, of course, still approved its electoral scheme, but the plan couldn't move forward without approval at the district's annual meeting, which is sort of like an annual congregational meeting. Any resident who showed up would get to have one vote. My mom and her friends mobilized. Could they get enough people to show up? Could they even get people interested in this? For weeks, they planned and had conversations and emailed everyone they could think of. Whichever side brought the most people to the high school auditorium for the meeting would win. On the night of the meeting, an overflow crowd turned out. But which side were all these people on? You couldn't tell by looking at them. At first, it wasn't clear how it was going to go. And the ballots came in. The extremists' plan went down in flames. There were 2 no votes for every yes vote. People were finally paying attention. Speaking up, showing up, and being organized combined to save the day. Your theme this month here at the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Rochester is the path of courage. And this morning I want to talk about a couple of different parts of that path, about how we might arrive at a place of courage and the different directions courage might take us once we find it. And these times we find ourselves in are a good time to look at the courage we can bring to all that's going on. Words like courage and bravery may not be words that we hear every day. They often seem reserved for extraordinary events. The famous American novel, The Red Badge of Courage, takes place amid the tumult and carnage of the Civil War, the red badge referring to a wound received in combat. And we hear a lot about bravery every September when we remember the fallen heroes of 9/11 and those terrorist attacks, which also were acts of war. It's as if courage and bravery mostly exist in the very worst and most violent of human circumstances. Another area where we sometimes hear about courage is when someone has a serious illness. A brave battle with cancer is a familiar phrase, even though an oncology ward is nothing like a combat zone. It's interesting to me that concepts of courage and bravery seem inseparable from a kind of militarism, when there are so many other ways to have courage. The British journalist John Diamond is among those dismayed that concepts like bravery and battle are sometimes imposed on people who are sick. Diamond is the author of a memoir titled Because Cowards Get Cancer Too. Perhaps some of you in this medically oriented city have heard of this book. I despise the set of warlike metaphors that so many apply to cancer, Diamond writes. He says this not because he's a pacifist, but because of the moral framework that is implied. He doesn't like the idea that medical treatment is somehow a conflict between good and evil, and the implication that only the patients who fight hard enough and are good enough deserve to live. And as for courage, Diamond describes himself as, quote, the world's least brave person. And I will say that he makes a pretty compelling case that that is true. In his argument that he's not courageous, he says that courage only applies to situations where there is a choice. And treating his cancer did not really involve making a choice. He was just accepting his circumstances and doing what needed to be done to try to stay alive. Of course, there are people who are energized by viewing illness as a battle. And I don't mean to take that away from anyone who draws strength from that metaphor. It's important and empowering for individuals going through any kind of challenge to define that challenge as they see it. But it's best not to presume or project or expect courage from anyone facing fear or a vulnerable situation. I imagine many of you have heard of Dr. Brené Brown, the University of Houston professor who has done a lot of speaking and writing about vulnerability. And you may be familiar with how she sees vulnerability not as frailty or as weakness, but as a source of power. She's done abundant research on this topic. And in a 2016 On Being podcast, she said this: "I cannot find a single example of courage, moral courage, spiritual courage, leadership courage, relational courage. I cannot find a single example of courage that was not born completely of vulnerability." This makes sense to me because how can you be courageous if you didn't have something to fear? Brown also once said that vulnerability is not winning or losing, it's having the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome. Vulnerability is not weakness, she says, it's our greatest measure of courage. That's a long way from popular images of courage as something that's about fearlessness or about some kind of hyper-masculine transcendence of emotion. Courage isn't always or even primarily about taking part in a war or saving people from death. Nor is courage primarily a feeling. It's more about what we do. Brené Brown's definitions of courage include inner strength and a level of commitment. Inner strength and a level of commitment. If we look at it that way, there are so many other ordinary ways that ordinary lives require courage. From my own life, I think of the times I've walked to or from a gay bar alone in a city at night. For women, it can take courage to walk down any street or to enter a room full of men. For people of color, it can take courage to enter a room full of white people. The power imbalances across our society create situations that can require inner strength and a level of commitment just to do everyday things in ordinary life. And one of the things that everyday life is asking of us more and more is to speak up, not just to express ourselves. Self-expression in some form is essential for every human being. But right now, the times we are living in are asking us to do more than express our opinions and feelings. We're being asked to speak up and speak out, speak for, speak against, across a variety of issues so important to our core values and to the lives of our fellow citizens. What can be confusing right now is that for a lot of people, especially in Minnesota, daily life functions pretty well and is going on as before. Women in Minnesota have the same reproductive rights now that they did back in the spring, and they've even had them affirmed by a court ruling. They don't need to travel to other states for essential health care. Parents of trans kids here aren't being harassed and investigated as child abusers by state agencies, as is happening in Idaho and Texas. We Minnesotans have the same voting rights we've always had statewide, with easy access to the polls. And climate change in the Midwest is serious and real, but it's not California on fire real or Florida underwater real. For many of us, especially the more privileged among us, if you look no further than your own daily routine and opportunities, things seem pretty fine, particularly on a sparkling autumn day. But part of the reason we are Unitarian Universalists is that we look beyond our individual lives and recognize the interconnectedness of people to each other and to the world. We know that we can't just rest or retreat because we have access to reproductive health care, because it's easy for us to vote, because we aren't losing our homes or dying in a climate catastrophe, because we care about other people, and because we know that our fate and the fate of democracy are all interdependent. That's why I think it's so important to think with complexity about ideas of bravery and courage. As I said earlier, it's easy to see bravery on something like 9/11. But in 2022, today's attacks on our country, on our democracy, may actually be more dangerous to our country's stability and future. It's hard to see sometimes. Other than January 6th, these newest attacks don't make for riveting visuals. Court rulings that further corrupt campaign financing, just black and white documents sitting on a page. The gradual taking over of state legislatures and small-town school boards by people with authoritarian tendencies, that doesn't look very interesting on television. And unlike wars or even struggles against cancer, it's hard to imagine a movie or a novel about the kinds of conflicts that are going on right now. But even without bombs bursting in air, even without much change in routine in so many of our personal lives, our courage is needed. Because what's happening is dangerous and freedom-eroding and real, as so many of us know. And so we are being called on to take some chances and draw upon our courage. The courage to knock on a stranger's door. The courage to make a phone call for a campaign you believe in. The courage to show up at a city hall or a county board meeting or at a protest that might put your face on TV. The courage to put up a lawn sign that your neighbor might not agree with. The courage to give a ride to someone you don't know on Election Day. I suspect that the people in this room have a sense of history and are paying attention and have some understanding that our nation is at a critical moment. And yet there are still plenty of people who think they have no role to play in bringing about positive change, or they think there's nothing they can do in face of all the bad stuff. I don't do politics. It's not my thing. I'm not an activist. You might hear any of these things from people you know. But in fact, it doesn't matter if your primary identity is as an artist or a business person or a roofer or a caregiver. Being an engaged citizen is a separate and essential role. It's a both and. And as world leaders from Elie Wiesel to MLK have said, to do nothing differently in turbulent times is to take a side. Fortunately, everywhere I go, I'm seeing a high level of engagement. Granted, I spend a lot of time in UU congregations, so my view may be a little skewed. I am well aware that not every American is writing letters for Vote Forward, or raising money for Planned Parenthood, or supporting Black, Indigenous, and people of color-led community organizations, or really going to bat for asylum seekers. So it's heartening to see the work that's being done. When the news of the day tilts toward the overwhelming, spending time among motivated people working together is a great antidote. And being part of a team, a wedge, a delegation can be so important. As Marge Piercy says in her poem, it starts when you care to act. It starts when you do it again and they said no. It starts when you say we and know who you mean, and each day you mean one more. That's how the great liberation movements have done it. That's how the small pro-democracy groups like the one in my hometown are doing it. Caring, acting, and ever expanding the definition of we. I want to leave us with a quote from Audre Lorde, who lived courageously as an openly lesbian Black feminist at a time when it was even more difficult to embody such identities than it is now. Her words are these. She says this: next time ask, what's the worst that will happen? Then push yourself a little further than you dare. Once you start to speak, people will yell at you. They will interrupt you, put you down, and suggest it's personal. And the world won't end. And the speaking will get easier and easier. And you will find you have fallen in love with your own vision, which you may have never realized you had. And you will lose some friends and lovers and realize you don't miss them. And new ones will find you and cherish you. And at last you'll know with surpassing certainty that only one thing is more frightening than speaking the truth, and that is not speaking. It's a good time to let your light shine. May it be so. And let us now sing together This Little Light of Mine, which is number 118 in the Gray Book. Please be seated, I think, right? We're going to put out our chalice with some closing words from the Reverend Wayne Arneson. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone.